You are listening to a Galatea audio production of Yes, Mr. Knight, Book 1, written by Natalie Roche. Jamie. Mason Knight. He had an unforgettable face, not just because he was extremely attractive, but because it was plastered on the cover of every single magazine in the city. The hottest, most eligible billionaire bachelor in the world. He was tall, muscular, had a jawline you could cut diamonds with, and a gaze that promised a world of pleasure and pain. But his personality stinks. He was an asshole through and through, not a kind or thoughtful bone in his body. When he set his sights on a woman, she was his for one night and one night only. Unfortunately, he was also my boss. Well, my boss's son, but he ordered me around like he owned me anyway. I stared numbly at the photocopier as it coughed up the rest of the memos I was supposed to prepare. It was during lunch break, but I had to get a head start on all this extra work. Probably going to be late tonight.
Classic.
Not my fault. Staying late with that sexy boss of yours? He's probably slept with half the women at the company by now. Can you blame them? Yes. I don't want to be another one of his floozies.
We'll be at the usual table.
Be there as soon as possible. Take your time. I shook my head, a smile on my face. I've been friends with Jamie and Ethan for years, and their antics still cracked me up. I piled the papers into my arms and slowly made my way to Mason's office. I'd just drop these off on his desk and grab a quick bite to eat before lunch ended. Carmen's convinced that I'm going to end up sleeping with Mason. I'd be lying if I said that I hadn't thought of it. Mason could make supermodels look like street bums. Hell, I'd checked out his butt in those designer pants a few times as he walked by, but there was no way I'd let myself get caught up in it. Mixing my personal and professional life would be a nightmare. I bumped open Mason's door and froze. There in front of me was Mason Knight's tanned, toned, bare ass. His pants were half down his legs as he banged Jen from the finance department on his desk. "Harder!" she moaned in delight, and he moved at a more rapid pace. When she opened her eyes and saw me standing there, she let out a screech and covered her humongous fake tits. "Oh my God, Mason!" Mason Knight paused, twisted around, and set his dark eyes on me, the kind of eyes that would have anyone cowering at his feet. Here's the documents you wanted," I mumbled. "Jesus Christ, get the fuck out," he ordered. I closed the door in a panic and scurried back to my desk with the photocopies still in hand. It wasn't like the man was in the position to take them off me. I sat back down behind my desk, heat in my cheeks, feeling absolutely mortified. "Why didn't you just bolt, Jamie? Such an idiot." I grabbed my things in a rush, hoping to escape before Mason could corner me. The last thing I wanted to do was face him alone after seeing him in the act. I rushed away from my desk, turning the corner towards the elevators, and slammed right into a muscular chest. Powerful arms wrapped around me to keep me from tumbling to the floor. "And where do you think you're going?" Mason said in my ear, causing a shiver to roll down my spine. Well, the photocopies are done and I didn't have any lunch yet, so my office. Now." He turned around and walked away without another word, expecting me to follow. I crossed the room, shaking in my 4-inch Mary Janes. Just be polite and maybe he'll forget the whole thing. I saw Jen walking down the hallway towards the elevators, very pointedly not looking in my direction. Well, I'd be embarrassed too if I got walked in on. I followed Mason back into his office. He sat down in the black leather swivel chair behind his desk, glaring at me as I closed the door behind me. As my mother always said, if looks could kill. My hands fidgeted in front of me. That's how nervous he was making me, like I was back in school being told off by a teacher. "Jamie," he sat forward in his chair. "You disrespected me back there by walking into my office unannounced. You should know you're supposed to knock before you come in." "Prick. Well, maybe you shouldn't have been banging a woman in your office during lunch break," my mouth said before my brain could catch up. I wanted to kick myself. Talking back to Mason Knight would not help. I can do whatever, or whoever, I want in my office. The force of his glare was so strong that it made me want to inch back towards the door. "Your dad wouldn't appreciate you. My dad will never know, because you won't tell him a word about this. Or what? I challenged. Or I'll fucking fire you. My jaw almost hit the ground. That's illegal, he smirked, standing up from his chair and walking toward me. He loomed over me, trapping me against the door to his office. You think that matters to me? You don't think I can bury you if I wanted? My knees began to shake as he trapped me with those dark, intense eyes of his. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off of his body and smell the intoxicating scent of his cologne. For a second, I could understand the allure of having Mason Knight above me, to feel his weight pushing down on me as he held me with those powerful arms. Do you understand me? He asked, his voice like velvet. Yes, Mason, I stammered, clearing my mind of that crazy idea. It's Mr. Knight. I'm your boss. Get used to calling me that. I just nodded, afraid that I'd blurt out another sarcastic remark. And just to make sure you don't squeal, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on you. He leaned even closer, his biceps bulging against the sleeves of his dress shirt. Congratulations, Jamie. You're going to be my personal assistant. What? Is he insane? I just saw his bare ass as he pumped into Jen from finance over and over again. The last thing I wanted to do was to spend more time with him. But looking up at him, seeing the expression in those dark, bottomless eyes, did I really have a choice? Aren't you glad? He asked. I don't usually have a personal assistant. You're the exception. Yes, I said dryly. Yes, what? Yes, Mr. Knight. He smiled at me, dark and dangerous. Good. You start now. Jamie. I've been slaving for Mr. Knight all day. Not the father, the son. Since I had caught him and Jen, he'd had me running around like a headless chicken. His way of punishing me. It was quite clear that he had it in for me now, and I was not all that fond of him either. Personal assistant? More like a personal slave. Mr. Knight, the father, not the son, walked up to my desk, a kind smile on his face. Are you okay, Jamie? He asked. You seem a little tense. I'm fine, Mr. Knight, I said. Just a long day. Please, just Harry is fine. I smiled back at him. How could father and son be so different? Jamie, Mason called across the office. Speak of the devil. I need 2 coffees for myself and my client. Be quick about it. I had to force myself to not roll my eyes while Harry was right in front of me. You sure you're okay? Harry asked, looking between me and Mason. Could he feel the tension between us even on opposite sides of the office? Yep, totally fine, Harry. Do you need anything else? No, I'm fine, darling. Thank you. He gave me another encouraging smile before frowning in the direction of his son and walking towards his own office. The father was a joy to work for. The son, on the other hand, Jamie, where's that coffee? The rest of the day went by like that. I tried to get my work done while Mason just kept piling on more things for me to do. The hours blurred by, and before I knew it, the day ended. Well, not for me. I still had a few things to do for Mr. Jerkface. My phone rang on the desk beside my computer. I glanced down and saw it was from Ethan. ETA? He asked, not even saying hello. Maybe 30 minutes. I told you I'd probably be late. Well, we're at Lacey's already and there's a drink here with your name on it. Hurry up. Impatient much? I'll get there as soon as I can. Don't rush her, I heard Carmen chime in the background. She's getting freaky. I am not. I had to do a few last checks on a report. If there was even a comma out of place, I was certain that Mason would give me hell for it. Well, hurry. Carmen's only had one and she's already being a huge pain in my ass. Ethan chuckled. I could hear Carmen's cheery voice in the background. Those two. All right, soon. You're not going to believe the nightmare of a day I've had. I have so much to... I was interrupted by the clearing of a throat behind me. Oh, crap. I turned and saw him standing by my desk, arms folded as usual, the most pissed-off expression on his face. My heart was racing, my cheeks scorching. I have to go. See you soon. I hung up the phone before Ethan even had the chance to reply. I stood on shaky legs, not knowing what to say or do. Is everything okay, Mr. Knight? He glared at me for a few seconds. I'm going to need you to stay a little longer, Jamie. There's something that needs doing for Monday morning. But you what? Have better things to do than save your brand new job? Don't make the mistake of getting on my bad side twice in one day, Jamie. It won't end well for you. The prick, he's punishing me big time. I really need this job, and he knows it. I'm under his thumb. Okay, sure, I can stay. He handed me a small binder. 50 copies. I'm sure you're okay with that. And make it snappy. I've got appointments for you to set up afterward. I mustered a smile, trying to show that I wasn't bothered by him, which of course I was. Give me strength. An hour later, I walked across the office with a stack of papers in my arms so high I had to peer around them to see where I was going. Juggling the stack of papers, I knocked on Mr. Knight's door. I hoped to God I didn't face his wrath again today. Come in. I was sure he knew I had a stack of files, but decided not to get up and open the door to help me. I fiddled with the handle until I eventually got it open and pushed it the rest of the way with my bum. I was sweating as I turned around and walked toward him. I see you've learned your lesson. He leaned forward in his chair with a smirk. I guess there's hope for you after all. Well, I'm not one to make the same mistake twice. I set the files down in front of him on the dark wooden desk. I made 55 copies just in case. It was taking all the willpower I had in me just to be nice to him. His eyes scanned the stack of papers. I thought it looked like a lot. Your little arms must be tired after some hard work. Really? Couldn't I report him for the way he's treating me? That didn't work out for me with my last boss, though. I took a booklet from the top and leaned forward slightly, placing it down in front of him. So this bit here, I did it in bold to draw more attention. Well, you're certainly drawing my attention. Mr. Knight's smirk was still firmly in place. Did you mean to leave that button open? He pointed to my blouse with the pen he was holding. I looked down and noticed my white blouse was gaping between buttons, putting my baby blue bra on show. I mean, it wasn't as if it was avoidable. I was right in front of him. Oh! I straightened up and fixed the gap. Did you do that for my benefit? He sat back in his chair, his eyes scanning my body. They're just breasts. I've seen plenty of them. I am a man. I'm sure he has, of all shapes and sizes. The last pair he saw were Jen's, and he looked like he was getting a right handful. I folded my arms over my chest. Do you need anything else from me? Or is it okay that I leave? Please tell me I can leave. I beg of you. I don't need you for anything else. You did better than I thought. I was expecting you to be useless. Don't rise to him, Jamie. See you Monday morning, then. I strode out, grabbed my things from behind my desk, and left in a hurry before he could change his mind. I'm so sorry I'm late. Forgive me, I pleaded as I slid into the booth beside Carmen, who sipped Jack and Coke through a straw. Ethan moved a wine glass across the table toward me. Been nearly 2 hours. What kept you so long? Mason Knight had me do some photocopying because I caught him banging Jen from finance in his office. I picked up the wine glass, taking a well-deserved drink after a long, hard, draining day. That lucky bitch, murmured Carmen. What she got that I haven't? Huge tits, I replied. But trust me, you don't want that man. He's a prick with zero respect for anyone. Oh, I don't need him to respect me. I just need him to pleasure me. I want to see what he's like without a stitch of clothing on. She winked at me. Maybe you can bring me to that Christmas party. I'm not allowed to. It's just staff. I set the glass back down on the table. I don't think I'm going to go anyway, not even for the drinks and buffet. Office Christmas parties were not my thing. You have to go, Jamie, Ethan protested. You can't miss a party at night and sun. I hear there's going to be strippers on poles and wads of cash given to everyone who shows. I rolled my eyes. I'll think about it and decide next week. I wasn't interested, but I knew I needed to make more of an effort to get to know the people I worked with. Besides the fact that I want to stay on Harry's good side and Mason's. Jamie, After a 45-minute catch-up lunch with Ethan, I walked the cold street toward night and sun. December was absolutely bitter, so much so that I covered up head to toe. I held my phone against my ear, chatting to my mom. She was doing her usual thing, trying to set me up on a date. I really hated it when she did this, but the woman was on a mission to get me married off before I hit my 30s. I don't know. I don't really like the idea of going out with a man I've never seen before, Mom. What if I don't like what he looks like? I don't mean to sound shallow, but I'm going to need some encouragement if she wants me to do this. Mom clicked her tongue off the roof of her mouth. Ryan is very good-looking, and I think you would like him. He seems very eager to meet you, Jamie. I caught a glimpse of Mason Knight as I got closer to the office door, his arms wrapped around a different blonde, his hands squeezing her ass over a tight black mini. She was whispering in his ear, and by the look on his face, it was something rather raunchy. He's such a whore! Mason glanced in my direction as I opened the door before focusing his attention back on the blonde. He wasn't worried about looking inappropriate in front of staff. I guess why would he, when he's screwed half of them already? Jamie, are you there? Sorry, Mom, I was distracted. What was it you were saying? I pressed the button continuously for the elevator to come down. It was quiet in reception, a change from the usual rush. I was just asking, would you give Ryan a chance? One date? I can send you a picture of him so you can see for yourself. Oh, give in, Jamie. You know she won't. I sighed as I pressed the button for the elevator again. All right, I'll go on the date, but I swear, Mom, if this guy is a weirdo, I'm so out. I heard a chuckle beside me and I looked over. Shit. Mason Knight's muscular frame was standing right next to me. He was looking at the elevator doors with a huge smirk on his face. I assumed he'd overheard my conversation. I have to go, Mom. Call you back. I hung up the phone while she was still chatting away, placed my phone back in my bag, and looked toward the elevator doors, willing them to open so I wouldn't have to stand next to him in awkward silence. So, your mom is setting you up on a date. That's a bit weird. You can't find a date for yourself? Mr. Knight turned his head in my direction, waiting for an answer. I was biting my tongue. I wanted to tell him to keep his opinions and rude comments to himself. It's a blind date. I'm just going to humor her. It's worth it to keep her off my back about my dating life. Or your lack of. He chuckled. I'm guessing you don't do much dating. A word of advice, wear something a bit revealing and try not to talk a lot. A man is only interested in looks, after all. Of course he would say that. He doesn't care if a woman is sensitive and sweet, just as long as she's hot enough to bang. The elevator doors opened. No one was inside, no one waiting to get in but us. Just me and Mr. Knight to ride 48 floors alone. What were the chances? Are you coming or what? Mr. Knight held the door open. I'd advise that you get in, unless you want to stay late again. Yes, thank you. I think I would rather be in a confined space with him for a couple of minutes than stay late again. I stepped in and stood next to him. Mason pressed the button for the 48th floor and up we went. I'm going to need you to set up that meeting with Mr. Henderson for some time this week. He was tapping his screen lightly. Make sure it's at the Bradford, and make sure it's not too late. Yes, Mr. Knight. I was trying my best to be professional and polite. All of a sudden, the elevator shuddered and came to a halt, causing my heart to jump up into my throat. The doors didn't open. It was quite clear that it wasn't just stopping at another floor. No fucking way. For fuck's sake, Mr. Knight exhaled, pressing the buttons over and over again. I can't believe this is happening. I sighed. We're stuck. He rolled his eyes. You don't say. Of all the elevators in the building to get in, we got into this one. I have a meeting in the conference room at 2:00. He glanced down at his expensive watch and released a sigh of frustration. Unless we get out of here in 8 minutes, which I really hope we do, he isn't going to make that meeting. The thought of being alone with this asshole for a couple minutes tops was bad enough. Now it seemed that it was going to be a lot longer than that. Just then, the emergency intercom sputtered to life. Hi, you're speaking with Adam from security. We've been alerted that there is a fault with the elevator you're in. If you two could sit tight, help is on the way." Mason pressed the button for the speaker.
"How long of a wait are we talking about here?"
he asked with a tone. "We're looking at about 45 minutes to an hour's wait, but hopefully we can get you sorted a lot sooner than that. Just sit tight and try to remain calm." Remain calm. Easy for Adam to say when he wasn't stuck in here with Mason Knight. Mr. Knight turned, agitated.
"Looks like we're stuck, Jamie."
I felt like rolling my eyes at him just like he did me, but of course I couldn't. Guess so. I hope the elevator starts up soon. I would literally rather be caught with anyone else. 45 minutes later, and we were still stuck in a confined space, the elevator from hell. Feeling hot, too. Clothes had been shed, just the outer layers. I was trying to last as long as I could with my extra layers until it got to the point where I couldn't take the heat any longer. I didn't want to sweat in front of him. I was resting against the wall, turned to the side so I wasn't facing him. I wasn't trying to be rude, I just figured it would be awkward if we were facing each other in silence. "I've never seen you wear those before." Mr. Knight pointed to the pair of glasses I was wearing, black framed ones I wear when I'm reading, which I was currently doing to pass the time. "I try not to. They're just for reading." I looked back down at my romance book, not even reading, just pretending. "You don't like them?" He scooted closer, invading my space with his scent. As much as I dislike the man, he does smell rather good, like very good. I looked up from my page again and gave him a shrug of the shoulder. "Well, they're not exactly attractive." I can't believe he's actually trying to make conversation. "What's that you're reading?" Instead of waiting for a reply, he snatched the book from my hands and turned it over to look at the cover. A romance. Why am I not surprised? I furrowed my brow. Because I read romance. I think a lot of people do.
Boy, I wish I could tell him to mind his own business and shove his opinions up his chauvinistic ass.
Mr. Knight chuckled. "When are you going to wake up and realize life isn't a fairy tale?" He handed me my book.
"There is no such thing as happily ever after, Jamie."
I was looking up at him, seeing how dark his eyes were now that he was so close. The closest I'd ever been to him. "That's your opinion, I guess. I'm allowed to have mine, just like you are." The elevator jolted suddenly and then started to move, climbing the floors of the building and bringing us closer and closer to 48, closer and closer to freedom. "We should grab our things," I said, and he moved out of my way. We both grabbed our jackets and stood by the doors waiting for them to open, stuck in an elevator with a man who hates me. It would happen to me. Carmen is going to laugh her ass off when I tell her. Just as we reached our floor, Mr. Knight turned his head in my direction. "You're wrong about the glasses. They're not unattractive." The doors opened and he walked out, leaving me in confusion. After an eventful afternoon of elevator frustration with the big bad boss, I spent the rest of the day buried in my work. It was after 6 before I even took my eyes off the screen and realized people had already started to leave. I'd better get going too. I was packing up my things and tidying my desk when I faintly overheard a conversation from Mr. Knight's office, between him and Jen.
"Come on, Mason. You know I can give you anything you want back at mine. One time and one time only. Remember what I told you?" His words came out harsh. "And you told me you were okay with that." I just thought,
"I know what you thought. You thought you could change me. Everybody thinks that. Well, I am who I am, and I can't be changed." "Fine, then. But you know where I'll be if you change your mind." The door opened, and Jen walked out with a scowl on her face, a scowl I was sure she hadn't shown him. I felt sorry for her a bit, but she must have known what she was getting into. I shook my head. My phone vibrated on my desk. I picked it up and saw that it was a text from Mom. When I opened the message, I was pleased to see a picture of a very handsome man on my screen. "That woman works fast." Mom was right. Ryan had a rugged look about him, exactly what I liked in a man.
"That isn't the guy that you're going on a date with, is it?"
Mr. Knight's voice came from behind me. I turned around and saw that he had been peering over my shoulder.
"Why do you ask?"
He screwed up his face.
Just not the type of guy I imagined you with.
Well, I could imagine myself with him. I shoved the last of my things into my bag in a hurry. Do you need anything else? Or is it okay that I leave?
You can go. I'll see you tomorrow.
He placed his hands in the pockets of his pants and walked toward his office for another long night.
What is it with him?
Last week, he'd gone absolutely ballistic and threatened my job, but since the faulty elevator earlier, he seemed to think he could give his opinions on my life. Fuck that asshole. Jamie. After a quick lunch in the coffee shop close to the office, Carmen and I walked toward Night and Sun. Usually, we would try to meet for lunch at least twice a week. We liked having the extra time to gossip. Are you excited about meeting him? Carmen asked, her voice muffled by the scarf mostly covering her face. The girl hates winter with a passion. Sure I am. A bit nervous too, it's been a while for me. It's definitely been a while. I wouldn't want him to expect too much too soon, like sex. Ryan is cute. I think he could be good for you. We stopped at the door and Carmen looked at me. Just be yourself and he's going to love you. My lips quirked up into a smile. I guess we'll see. I noticed the expression on Carmen's face change. Her mouth was hanging open and her eyes were round. What the hell was wrong? Carmen, are you... She turned me around before I had a chance to finish my sentence, and I saw what it was that had her so speechless. Mason Knight was walking our way in one of his perfectly fitted Armani suits. Over that, he wore an expensive woolen coat with the collar up to keep out the cold. Can't deny the man's got style. Carmen stared at him like a starving woman eyeing up a piece of meat. I would give anything to get my hands on. Honestly, I don't know what you see in him. And I really didn't know. Muscles, chiseled jaw, dark eyes, light stubble. No idea at all. Mason arrived at the entrance and noticed us straight away, I think because of the look on Carmen's face. He gripped the handle of the door and opened it. You should get in out of the cold, Jamie. I have no cover for you if you get sick. Of course he wouldn't. I turned my head in Carmen's direction. I'll see you at home. She gave me a sly wink so Mr. Knight wouldn't see. I'm surprised she hasn't asked me to put in a good word for her yet. I walked into the building ahead of Mr. Knight, toward the elevator. He wasn't far behind me. The doors opened and we stepped in. Just the two of us, again. He stood alongside me, smelling good, like last time.
Who was that girl you were with?
Carmen. She's a good friend. I looked at him, unable to hold back any longer. Don't try to sleep with her. She'll hope for something more, and you can't give her that. Carmen had said different to me, but I knew her. I knew that once wouldn't be enough, that she would expect more. She always did. Mr. Knight raised an eyebrow at my forwardness. Relax, Jamie. Brunettes aren't my type. Pulling my bottom lip between my teeth, I looked forward, folding my arms. Doesn't like brunettes. I was surprised by that, given his comment about the glasses. You have a bit of something there. He extended his right hand, and I flinched away from him. It's just snow from outside. He was close to me, so close that I noticed how tired he looked. Most likely from trying to fit in a quickie on his lunch break. The man is sex-crazed. Mr. Knight was holding a curl of my hair between his thumb and forefinger, looking down at me. Brunette. Had he only just realized that? The doors opened and he didn't move, still holding my hair between his fingers. It was weird. The feeling, I couldn't describe it. There you are, Harry said, dressed in a fancy suit just like his son. Everything okay here? I flushed bright red. Everything is fine, Harry. I should get to work. Harry looked at his son as we stepped out of the elevator. Our 2 o'clock is the conference room, Mason. Don't keep them any longer. I'm going, he answered in a hard tone. Jamie, will you check in with Mr. Henderson and make sure we're still on for dinner tonight? Yes, Mr. Knight. I'll give him a call. I walked ahead, set my things down on my desk, and sat back in my swivel chair. Only a couple of hours before Ryan picked me up for our date. The nerves were setting in.
Mason. I was standing by the door to my office, watching her, bent over her desk, clearing away her files. I was getting a great view of her ass in that skirt. Had she been wearing that earlier? She must have changed during the workday. But why? I guess I shouldn't be surprised. Women can be like that. I don't go for brunettes, never. But I was tempted by her now, ever since that gaping shirt, ever since she'd called me Mr. Knight. One time, on my desk, fucking her roughly. Just the way I like to have them. It was clear that she was not going to make it easy for me, which made me want her even more. I liked a challenge, and she was certainly that. Brent stood beside me at my office door. "You look like you're enjoying the view." "Well, it's quite the view," I said back. "My father and I do business with the company that Brent works for, so he's around the office a bit. We get on quite well. We're into the same things: money, power, women." Brent folded his arms over his chest. "I can tell you're already thinking about tapping that." "She hates me, you know. But I like a challenge. The quiet ones are always the best in bed." I had a feeling that Jamie Harris was full of surprises. "Well, it looks like you have some competition." Brent pointed in Jamie's direction and I looked over. The date was here, and he'd brought flowers. "You said you like a challenge? There's one for you."
Jamie. Ryan looked even more handsome in person. A fair amount of facial hair, his eyes gentle and blue. The eyes of a kind man. It was obvious that's what he was. I'd been nervous before, but I was even more nervous now he was standing in front of me. I didn't want to screw up and say something totally ridiculous. "I hope it's okay that I came up. When you didn't come down, I thought maybe you had to work late or something." My nude-colored lips curved into a smile of reassurance. "Yes, it's fine. I was just running a bit behind, but I'm ready to go." I grabbed the last of my things and we walked toward the elevator. "So, Ryan, where are we going for dinner?" He pressed the button. "The Bradford." The bloody Bradford. Exactly where Mr. Knight's dinner meeting was happening. Jamie. I was smiling as I looked across the dinner table at Ryan. Things were going well between us, at least in my opinion, but he seemed to be enjoying himself too. Such a nice guy, and actually making an effort to get to know me. That isn't the case with every man. "I had no idea you were a vegetarian. I've always wanted to be one, but I've never had the willpower to turn down a good steak." He chuckled. "Well, for me it wasn't hard. I've been a vegetarian since I was 16. It all started with a bet, actually. I found myself opening up to him naturally. I didn't even have to think about what to say next. The conversation just flowed." He raised an eyebrow at me. "A bet? This I have to hear." He sat, arms folded on the table, waiting for me to start. "It started with my dad thinking he was smart, betting I couldn't last a week without eating meat." I picked up my wine glass. Obviously, he didn't think I would last, but I've kept it going 10 years. "I'm impressed. You showed him." Ryan extended his beer bottle forward and tapped it off my glass. "Cheers to you for holding strong on that one." I wanted to prove him wrong. I think he knows not to mess with me now. I sipped from my glass and set it back down. We eyed up the desserts as our waitress placed them down. He was staring at the brownie in front of me. I laughed. "Do you want to try some?" I teased. "If you don't mind, that looks too fantastic to pass up. I've always been a sucker for this cheesecake, though. It's the only thing I order." Ryan leaned forward, took some brownie off my fork, and moaned in delight. "It's good, right?" I asked. The look of satisfaction on his face. He's so cute. Some women might find a predictable guy to be boring, but I liked that he was predictable. Especially since he was nice. "That chocolate sauce and whipped cream just topped it off." Ryan moved his plate across the table. "Try mine." I dug my fork into the strawberry cheesecake. It tasted good, but just wasn't my cup of tea. It was no chocolate brownie, that's for sure. "Jamie!" The sound of my name sent a cold panic through me. Mr. Knight was walking toward us, looking very surprised to see me at the same restaurant. I stood from my chair. I don't know why. "Mr. Knight!" My cheeks were flushed with embarrassment. I was really hoping to have dinner and leave without him seeing me. "Funny I should see you here. My dinner meeting will be just over there." He gestured over to an empty table, then glanced down at our half-eaten desserts.
I didn't know we were coming here.
He knows we're on a date, and he decided to approach us anyway. Ryan, this is my boss, Mr. Knight. Ryan, being the mannerly guy he was, stood from his chair and shook Mr. Knight's hand. It's nice to meet you, Mr. Knight. Oh, no need for formalities. Call me Mason. Jamie is just so professional. I think she likes the name. What the hell is wrong with this man? Unbelievably arrogant. Then I looked in Ryan's direction as he had started to cough. Like really cough. His face was red and blotchy, and he was wheezing. Uh-oh. Ryan, are you okay? Nuts, he wheezed. Were there nuts in that brownie? He opened the top 2 buttons of his plaid shirt. Oh my God, he has a nut allergy. I panicked, thinking about the worst possible outcomes. I'd never had allergies myself, but I knew the signs. Ryan scratched his face aggressively.
I need you to take me to the emergency room, Jamie.
Crap! I've been drinking! Hang on. I'll call an ambulance.
I can give you a lift, Mr. Knight cut in. Mr. Henderson hasn't shown yet. I'll call and tell him something came up.
I didn't want to take a lift off him, but I didn't really have a choice. It was nice of him to offer. Thank you, Mr. Knight, I said as I grabbed our things. An hour later, I was pacing the waiting room floor, worried sick about Ryan. By the time we'd arrived, he was swollen up like he had been stung by several bees. I'd never witnessed anything like it. I was scared. Stop pacing. It's not going to help the situation, Mason said from his plastic chair by the wall. I didn't understand why he was still here, why he hadn't just left after his driver had dropped us off. I can't help it. It's my fault he's here in the first place. I gave him that brownie. I paced some more in my 5-inch ankle strap heels. That was one way of getting my steps in. Mr. Knight released an audible sigh. How could it be your fault when you didn't even know he was allergic? If anything, it's his fault for not knowing the ingredients of the food he was eating. He has a pretty severe allergy to nuts. He should be more careful. Even if he was right, I was beating myself up over it. Maybe Ryan should have said something before he ate it, but it was still my brownie. I gave in and decided to rest in the chair right beside Mr. Knight. It was a bit weird being around him outside the office setting. You don't have to wait with me. You can leave if you want to. I'm sure you have important things to do, like pick up a stray before midnight. You work for me, Jamie. I want to make sure you have a way home. There's nothing like an allergy to ruin a first date, I quipped. I would have expected myself to ruin the date. I'm so accident-prone. Yeah, I'm starting to see that, he quipped back. We looked up as a nurse walked into the room. The patient is doing well. He's asking for you, Miss Harris. She smiled and indicated for me to follow her. I stood from my chair, thinking about my next words carefully as I walked toward the door. Then I turned and looked at him. Thank you, Mr. Knight. You didn't have to help us like you did. We can find our own way back. I walked to Ryan's room, feeling anxious about seeing him. What if he blamed me for the brownie? I stood at the blue curtain and peered in to where he was propped up on a bunch of pillows. Hey, you. Ryan lifted his head. He was looking a lot less blotchy now. Hey, Jamie, come on in. It's good to see my hero. I walked over and sat down beside him. Hero? Ha! I don't know about that. I was the one that let you eat that brownie. Well, I should have checked it didn't have nuts. That's my responsibility. I guess I got caught up in the moment. Things got a bit nutty back there, didn't they? I raised my eyebrows at his joke. Oh, you can joke about this? My heart rate has just returned to a normal pace and you're joking? But I was grinning. Sorry. I'm sorry I scared you, Jamie. I was really hoping our first date would end with a kiss. He reached out and took my hand in his. Who says it can't? I answered. I really liked this guy, enough to kiss him and enough to go on a second date. Well, all right then. Ryan sat up in bed and leaned toward me, placing a hand on my cheek and pressing his lips to my cheek. A very lovely, sweet kiss. Jamie. Thursday. Family dinner is a thing we do to spend quality time together. Mom is the big cook, and the rest of us devour everything she puts on the table. Coming over for dinner, I always know my jeans are going to be bursting when I leave. I had got off work earlier than usual, with plans to eat quickly and then meet Carmen for some late-night shopping. I needed an outfit for the Christmas party. The Christmas party Carmen was forcing me to attend, might I add. I was hiding in my parents' hallway as I chatted on the phone to Ryan. Given how the date had gone the other night, he was checking up on me. Funnily enough. "So, you're doing okay?" I asked. He chuckled. "I'm doing good, Jamie. I don't want you worrying. You know, I would be doing even better if I could see you again." Such a charmer. I leaned against the wall with a smirk. "Is that so? I've been thinking about you. One half date and it's left him thinking about me. I'd say that's a job well done. He seems quite invested in getting to know me more." "Likewise." "I'm free for a second go tomorrow night if you're up for it." I sighed. "I have my work Christmas party tomorrow, but I could do Saturday if that works for you." "Could do Saturday. I'll arrange something and let you know." The door to the kitchen opened. Mom popped her head out and smiled. She mouthed, "Dinner," and I nodded. "I should go, Ryan. I'll see you Saturday, okay?" "Bye, Jamie." I sat down at the table with my parents. Mom had a big spread set out, and I took everything veg. "Looks wonderful, Mom." "As always, she's been at it all day. There's even a cheesecake in the fridge," Dad said. "Oh, nice." I looked across the table at Mom. "What kind?" "Strawberry." Of course. It made me think of Ryan. Simple and sweet, just like that strawberry cheesecake. He's just the sort of guy I need in my life. I glanced over at my dad, in his seat at the head of the table. "How's work, Dad?" "Oh, the usual. Just thinking of my retirement. Then your mother and I can travel the world just like we always planned." My mom smiled at him. "Just a couple more years, Clay." My parents met at school. Dad was a big footballer there. But Mom got pregnant with my brother, Jake. They decided to elope, and Dad's dreams of going pro were pretty much over. With a family to support, he decided to become a lawyer just like his father was. But the excitement of the travel plan is looming. The front door opened. "Hello!" my brother shouted as he came through the hallway toward the kitchen. Jake is the other lawyer of the family. He walked in wearing his suit, direct from a long day at the office. "You started dinner without me?" "I made you a plate, love. Sit down and I'll bring it over." Mom was right to it, grabbing his meal from the kitchen area. She's become used to fussing over everyone. "So how was your date with Ryan, Jamie?" She already knew every detail of it. She'd called that night to find out. "You know how it went, Mom. Only over the phone, and everyone else wants to hear." She settled back at the table and waited. My mom is a relentless woman. "We had dinner at the Bradford. It was really nice. Ryan is so sweet, and we've got plans to go out again on Saturday." Jake chuckled. "Whining and dining his way into your pants." I glared at him. "Shut up, Jake. Maybe that's the way you think." He chuckled again. "That's the way all men think, Jamie. He always gets me so riled up. Jake and I used to fight like cats and dogs, but as we've gotten older, it's become bickering, or him taunting me." I rolled my eyes. "At least I have a dating life. It's more than I can say for you." "Hold it. Wasn't it just last weekend you went to the cinema alone? This dating thing is recent. Let's not pretend here." I turned to Mom, knowing she was the one who had told Jake about that outing. "Mom," she winced. "Sorry, I only mentioned it to your brother because I felt bad I hadn't offered to go with." I sighed. "It's okay." I looked down at my plate, hoping to finish the remainder of my dinner in silence. "Mom told me that guy of yours ate a nut and had some type of reaction that made him swell up like a balloon." "There he goes again." Carmen and I hit the shops before closing. I loved this time of year. The decorations, the food, the smells. Christmas is my favorite holiday. "That's what siblings do best," Carmen was saying. "Annoy the crap out of you. Especially the older ones who think they get to boss you around because they've been alive longer." "He makes me so mad," I groaned. "Loves to push my buttons, that one." Carmen chuckled. "Jake likes to push everyone's buttons. That's just who he is. Maybe it's time for a new and improved version. especially if he wants to settle down. He is almost 30. She guffawed at the ridiculousness of that suggestion, linked her arm into mine, and dragged me toward a costume shop. This is the new place I've been looking at online. A costume? No way! I shook my head. Can't I just wear something red and be done with it? Everyone will be dressing up, and you're the new hire. It's your job to commit to the bit. Without any further discussion, she got me into the store and we started to browse. There's never any point in saying no to her. She won't accept it anyway. She held up a costume, a red velvet dress with white fur trim and a matching hat. Are you serious? I asked her. You're going to look amazing. She winked. And I bet Mason is going to love it too. Now I'm definitely not going to wear it. Oh, come on, don't be like that. She pushed me towards the dressing room. At least try it on. I'll be looking at other options while you change. I sighed and walked towards the dressing room at the back of the store. I'd just try it on so she'd be satisfied. I felt ridiculous as I slipped on the dress. I knew everyone was dressing up for the Christmas party, but it didn't make me feel any less awkward. I stared at myself in the mirror. I looked like Santa's sexy helper. Not at all appropriate for the workplace. I opened the curtain to complain to Carmen. You don't seriously expect me to wear something so revealing. The words died on my lips. It wasn't Carmen on the other side of the curtain. His eyes locked onto mine before slowly roving down the rest of my body. His gaze lit a trail of fire across my skin. It was Mason fucking Knight. What the hell were the chances? Jamie. Wow. Mason looked me up and down, a perfect smile on his lips. I blushed so hard that my face was probably as red as that stupid dress. What are you doing here? I asked him. I crossed my arms in front of me, trying to hide how revealing the dress was, but all that did was push my boobs together even more. Mason just stared right at them, unashamed. What, I can't be here? He challenged. In a women's dress store by yourself? I took off the stupid Santa hat. Kind of suspicious. I'm not alone. He nodded towards another closed curtain. She's changing. I narrowed my eyes at him. I see. Mason shrugged, stepping closer. His massive frame loomed over me, and I felt so exposed in my skimpy Christmas dress. You look amazing, he said, his voice deep like the rumble of thunder. A shiver of pleasure ran down my spine, but I tried my best not to show it. This dress isn't for you. Who said it was? Mason's eyes glinted with mischief. But if I didn't know any better, I'd say you picked it out just for me. As if. Before I could tell him off further, the rattle of curtains opened and a bombshell brunette walked out wearing the tightest dress I'd ever seen. Mason glanced at her and smiled, turning to leave without another word. Before they disappeared around the corner, he shot me one final glance and winked. Arrogant jerk. But I noticed something strange. Mason was usually always with hot blondes, but this girl was a brunette? I frowned. What was up with that? And why did I care? Oh my gosh, that's the one! I turned to find Carmen squealing with approval, a few other dresses draped over her arm. She stopped short when she noticed my expression. Oh, it's not that bad. Did something happen? I sighed and caught a glimpse of Mason's broad shoulders as he left the shop. Nothing at all. I walked into Night and Sun feeling still uncomfortable. In the end, I'd begged Carmen not to make me wear the costume, and she'd lent me a red dress, which showed more cleavage than I'd realized. She had pouted about it, of course, but she won either way because I still looked like a slut. Harry had gone all out with decorations, catering, and a drinks table. The music was loud, and things were pretty wild, exactly the reason I hated things like this. Reminded me of being in a nightclub, and I really hate nightclubs. Jamie! You came! Harry walked toward me with his coat over his arm. I didn't think you would, I smiled. I changed my mind. You look very festive, Harry. His shirt was red under his black suit. He also had a Santa Claus hat on his head and some tinsel around his neck. He chuckled. The girls did that to me. They're quite persistent. I was just leaving for the night, actually. Oh, That was a real shame, as he was literally the only person here that I liked. Already? I've been here for a couple hours and I'm too old to party. You look stunning. Go enjoy yourself. I smiled. Okay. I'll last an hour and then I'll leave. I'm sure I stand out like a sore thumb, and not in a good way, more like an awkward way. I left a little something on your desk, just a happy holiday gift. He leaned in and whispered, "Enjoy your night, darling." Harry left, and I was alone with people I didn't really know, some of whom I didn't like. I guess when you don't really make conversation with the people you work with, you don't really get to know them. I walked through the crowd of coworkers dancing and having a good time and grabbed a tall glass of red at the bar just to loosen myself up. Lord knows I need it if I'm going to stay a while. "Oh, you came!" I turned around and there she was. Tall, blonde, humongous fake tits. "Be polite, Jamie. Be the nice girl your parents raised you to be." I smiled. "Jen, hi. You must have decided to come last minute. You don't look very festive." She looked me up and down, showing how much she disapproved of my outfit. "Nice to see you showing a bit more skin than usual." Thanks, I guess." I looked away, feeling a bit awkward. "I spent the whole day at the salon preparing for tonight. Nails, hair, makeup." She moved her hands down her skinny frame. "Good for you." I knew it was weak, but I didn't quite know how to behave around her. I didn't know what our relationship was. I drank the last of my wine and was ready to leave. I'd lasted almost an hour, and that was long enough for me. It was still early. I could meet Carmen and Ethan for drinks at Lacey's. I walked through the crowd when I remembered the present Harry had left on my desk. I didn't want to leave it behind, so I walked toward the elevator where security were standing by the doors. "No one allowed up, miss." The man in the fitted black suit was standing, looking sharp. Damn, the night shift security are so cute and well-attired. Mr. Knight left something on my desk. He said I could go up and get it before I leave. I'm his assistant. He shook his head. "I don't think so." "Well, why don't you give him a call and he'll tell you? I'll literally be up and back in 5 minutes. You can even mind my bag. It has everything. Credit card, money, phone, makeup." He sighed. "All right, go ahead. 5 minutes or I'll be coming after you." He pressed the button for the elevator and the doors opened. I stepped inside and turned around and smiled at him. "Thank you." When the elevator doors opened again, I walked toward my desk, enjoying the quiet from all the music and noise. Just like Harry had said, there was a small gift bag on my desk looking pretty. I don't really like taking gifts from anyone, but since it was Harry, I didn't want to say no. I looked in the bag and pulled out an adorable small box. I opened it up and saw a very expensive-looking pearl bracelet. It was gorgeous, of course, and it was too much. I would feel bad taking this from him. "You didn't wear the costume," I heard Mason's voice. I snapped the box shut and turned around. He was sitting behind his desk in his office, door open, looking straight at me. How did I not notice he was there? "Mr. Knight, I didn't see you there." My words came out a bit panicked. Mason got up from his chair and walked toward the door. "By the look on your face, I gave you a fright." I tucked a lock of hair behind my ear nervously. "I didn't know anyone was up here." "Then why are you here? I told security not to let anyone up." I asked nicely. "Your father left something on my desk and I came up to get it." I placed the cute box back in its bag. "A gift? That's a first for an employee. He must like you." "Well, he is a nice man and I like working for him, but this is too much. I plan to give it back." I worried what he thought of me. I didn't want him to think I was the greedy type. "Don't do that. He wouldn't have given it to you if you didn't deserve it." He stood with his hands in the pockets of his pants. "So what happened to that costume I saw you in?" I folded my arms as a barrier between him and me. "I decided not to wear it." He sighed. "Shame." Was this his way of hitting on me? I was determined not to allow him to use me like he did everyone else. His good looks wouldn't get him anywhere with me. He was looking at me again, up and down, head to toe with those brown eyes of his. Then he chuckled. You know I don't care about Jen, don't you? Of course he doesn't. I'm sure it's someone else by now, a woman every hour. I was surprised there wasn't a woman half naked in his office now. I avoided the question. I thought you would have been at the party. He sighed again. Were you looking for me? I don't really do Christmas. Haven't done so in years. Well, it was a party, and I'd heard the man liked to party. I'd figured the whole thing was his idea in the first place. I wonder why he doesn't do Christmas. What are you thinking? That I should go, actually. It's getting late and I'm meeting my friends for drinks. I snatched up the gift bag.
Ditching the office Christmas party. He clicked his tongue off the roof of his mouth. You're forgetting something.
What? I asked. Being alone with him was making me nervous. I wanted to leave before he intimidated me more. His eyes darted above us. Mistletoe. I looked up and saw the mistletoe indeed hanging over us, then at him. I thought you didn't do Christmas. You look good in red, Jamie, and mistletoe is the exception. Mason moved a bit closer, taking a gander at my sweetheart neckline.
Mr. Knight.
He placed his palm on my cheek, his fingers fanned out, his thumb caressing. Then his face moved toward mine for a kiss I wasn't expecting, a kiss I didn't want. But I found myself allured, unable to move. His mouth got closer and I could smell the spices of rum. As he pressed his lips to mine, I could taste them too. What the hell is going on? Mr. Knight, my boss, was kissing me and I was letting him. And it wasn't a kiss of tongue and passion. It was a pressing of lips, very soft lips, might I add. No, Jamie, this is so wrong. You have to end this now. There you are, miss, a voice called. I pulled back with a fright, practically shaking in my red, strappy heels. I looked toward the security man as he walked closer. 5 minutes, I know.
It's all right, Gavin. Miss Harris is okay to be up here,
Mason said. Gavin nodded.
Right. Sorry to disturb you both.
Hold on there, Gavin. I'm not another one of Mr. Knight's girls. I'm not staying here to do God only knows what. Imagine the filthy things he's into. I knew it was only a kiss under the mistletoe, but I had a feeling he wanted more from me. I looked at Mason, who stood cool and collected in his expensive workwear. I should really get going. I'm meeting my friends. I can give you a ride. You shouldn't be out this late all alone. That's all right. I'll be fine. I was completely mortified that I had let him kiss me. Good night, Mr. Knight. I turned and walked toward the elevator. Come Monday morning, I knew he would have no professional respect for me whatsoever. That was gone the second he'd kissed me. Bad move, Jamie. Bad fucking move.
Mason. I grasped her hair with both hands and pushed her head closer to my cock. She took me into her mouth with a moan, her luscious lips moving from base to tip. Keep going, I moaned. Harder. She sucked every inch of me, devouring me, this sexy blonde I'd met 5 minutes previously. A quick lunch meeting with clients, and this is what happens. The waitress who couldn't take her eyes off me had no need for words. She wanted a taste of the powerful man sitting at the best table in the restaurant. And here I stood, my palm flat against the door as she knelt in front of me. My hand was in her hair, pushing harder and harder as the pleasure built, and it became unbearable to hold off any longer. Fuck, I moaned as I exploded into her mouth. The blonde wiped the cum from her chin and licked it off her index finger. It didn't bother me that I was pants down and receiving a blowjob from a waitress in a restaurant bathroom. I didn't care. I don't care about anything besides growing the company and getting my cock wet.
Jamie. I was standing outside Night and Sun, chatting with Ethan on my lunch break. He'd called over to get a key to my apartment. He was staying with Carmen and me for the next couple days. He was getting new flooring put down in his apartment and needed to be out of the way. I still can't believe that. It's so not funny. I've been mortified about it ever since. I mean, who the hell does he think he is? Some desirable man who I wouldn't be able to resist. Ethan said,
Well, technically you didn't say no to him. You just got interrupted mid-mistletoe kiss.
I rolled my eyes, not helping. Obviously, the man is trying his luck with you. The question is, are you going to be the only woman to turn him down? I knew what Mason Knight was after, and it wasn't polite conversation. I'm not falling for his games, how he uses women for one time and one time only. I'm certainly not willing to be added to his collection. Of course I'm going to turn him down. I'm not stupid. Like I wasn't stupid enough to fall for the mistletoe kiss. Well, you already— No, I interrupted. I've had enough of that. Now it's time for the good parts of life. Like Ryan? I smiled. Spending time with him this weekend was fun. After 3 dates, I'd say things are going well. Ethan pulled up the collar of his coat as the snow started to fall. So you're thinking of sleeping with him then? I giggled. I think it's a possibility. There's no reason to hold back. I pulled my cardigan over, keeping out the cold. I should get back to work. He chuckled. Yeah, go on then. I'm freezing. I pulled my keys out of my pocket and handed them to Ethan. I hope you'll have a glass of wine waiting for me when I get home. Text me when you're on your way and I'll order takeout. Oh, takeout, I hugged him. You're too good to me. You're the one putting me up for a couple of nights. I owe you one. He pulled away. See you when you get back. I watched him walk off before turning around to head back into the building. As I did, I saw Mr. Knight standing there with his eyebrows raised. I'm guessing he overheard my conversation. He held the door open, and I walked past him into the building. This was the first I'd seen of him since what happened in his office Friday night. You're seeing that guy too? He asked as he followed me toward the elevator. No, I'm not seeing him too. That was a friend of mine. I cleared my throat, feeling awkward to say the least. Mason stood in front of me as he pressed the button. Friend, eh? Looked pretty cozy from where I was standing. What happened to the other guy? I sighed. Please don't do this, Mr. Knight. What happened the other night was a mistake. I don't just go around kissing people, especially not my boss. It was mistletoe, Jamie. Relax. The doors opened and we stepped inside into a crowd of coworkers. The elevator was full. That was a first, but I didn't mind at all. We stood alongside each other as we made our way up, floor by floor. Suddenly I felt a hand gripping my ass over my gray pleated skirt. My eyes were wide as I glanced over at him. He only shrugged. Stop it, I whispered, moving his hand. I didn't want him touching me, especially in a crowded elevator. What happened to just mistletoe? The doors opened and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. I walked back to my desk and sat down in my chair, breathing a sigh of relief. I watched Mason walk past my desk and casually into his office. I was hard at work, looking forward to getting home to a relaxing evening and a bottle of wine. It was only Tuesday, but I needed it. I had a feeling this was going to be a long week. Jamie. Mason was standing by his office door, hands in the pockets of his pants. My office. He walked in ahead and left the door open for me to follow. I followed him in and closed the door only slightly, then turned around and looked at him. Yes? He sat back in his leather chair and looked at me as I stood in front of his desk. Sit. I did as he asked and sat down in the chair, feeling anxious. I crossed my legs and fixed my skirt so more of me wasn't on show. I was wearing tights, but still. I have business in Seattle this weekend, and I need you to come with me to help out. We'll be flying out Friday morning and coming back Sunday night. Go to Seattle with him? No. Even on business, there's a good chance I'd be alone with him at least some of the time, and— Mr. Knight, I can't. He leaned forward, bracing his arms on the desk, his muscles bulging in his fitted white shirt. It wasn't a question. It's your job. You're coming. Working here the last couple of months, I'd never been asked to travel for work, but it was something that had always been a possibility. He was right. I couldn't turn down the request. He stood from his chair, walked around his desk, and sat on the edge in front of me. I'll pick you up at your apartment and we can leave for the airport. No, I can make my own way there. He released a frustrated exhale. Right, so be it. It's only 2 nights, so don't pack a suitcase full of shoes. He was completely serious, not trying to be funny. Next thing I know, he'll be telling me what to wear and how I should do my hair. Is that all, Mr. Knight? I asked, hoping that he would say yes so I could leave. He looked me up and down as usual.
Yes, you can go.
His eyes were on me as I stood. We were so close, our legs were practically touching.
We have a dinner while we're there. Make sure to bring that red dress of yours.
I almost felt like asking him how to do my hair, just to be smart. Of all the things that were going in my suitcase, that red dress would not be one of them. I immediately smelled Chinese spices when I walked in the front door. It was one of those very long days, and it wasn't the glass of wine I needed anymore. It was my bed. I walked into the living room kitchen, where Carmen and Ethan were sitting on the couch in front of the TV. "Look who it is! We were expecting you an hour ago," Carmen said. I sighed as I set my things down on the island. "I know. I ran out of gas and had to walk most of the way." Ethan was laughing at my expense. "That seems to be a habit with you. Anyway, we saved you some veg. It's in the microwave." "Thanks." I opened the door of the microwave and took the plate out without even heating it up. Too much time and effort, and I wasn't in the mood. "So I'm going to Seattle on Friday." Carmen took her eyes off the TV and looked at me. "With Ryan?" I shook my head. "With Mason Knight, on business." "Business," scoffed Ethan. "That man is trying his luck with you. When will you be back?" I braced my arms on the table as I played with the food on my plate. "Sunday night. I tried to get out of it, but I guess since I'm his assistant, I have to go." "Oh my God, you're totally going to sleep with him, aren't you?" Carmen asked. "Carmen, of course not. You know I wouldn't go there. Besides, I'm dating Ryan now." "Please. Mason kissed you the other night, and it wasn't because of mistletoe." Carmen stood from the couch and walked toward me with a cheeky smirk on her face. "Are you in separate hotel rooms?" "I assume so. He's taking care of all that. If I don't have my own room, I'm coming home." I brought a forkful to my mouth. "I bet he's going to try to sleep with you, though. It's Mason Knight we're talking about." Carmen pulled a bottle of wine from the fridge and filled 3 cups. "One of us should have our chance with him, love." "But I'm not." "Take one for the team and ride that monster cock." Carmen handed me a glass of wine and winked. "Then let me know how he is." "There's no way I'm sleeping with that guy." "No way." She wanted him like a lot of women did, but I would not be like them. I needed to be with a man who respected me. Thinking of a respectful man had me thinking of Ryan. I'm going to sleep with him just to show them all how serious I am. Jamie. Ryan and I were walking in the direction of my apartment after yet another amazing date. It was December weather, but we were bundled up and enjoying the late-night walk home. I looked over and smiled. "Thank you, Ryan. I really enjoyed myself." "I should be the one thanking you, Jamie, really. You did pay the bill, after all." "Well, it took some time to persuade you." I chuckled. "You paid the first couple of times. It was my turn to treat." He laced his fingers with mine as we walked side by side. "So you're leaving for that business trip early in the morning?" "I have to meet my boss at the airport at 8, but I'll be back Sunday evening."
Mason Knight. You know, I've heard things about him. He looked over at me. About the way he is with women. Heard things. Huh. I'll bet he looked into him to see who it is I'm working for. Could Ryan be the sort who would be threatened by Mason? "What is it you've heard?" He shrugged lightly. Basically that he has zero respect for women. Even the women who work for him aren't off limits." I chuckled. "You don't need to worry, Ryan. I have no intention of sleeping with Mr. Knight." "Good to know." There was genuine relief on his face. "I hope he keeps his hands to himself this weekend." "Me too." We stopped outside my building, a bit of shyness between us. Neither of us knew what to do next. "Just do it, Jamie. Just ask him." "Do you want to come up?" He grinned, moving his fingers through his hair. "Okay, I'd love to." I opened the door to the building and we walked inside. I can't believe I've just asked him to come up. I don't even have a plan for what to do when we get upstairs, but I was going to wing it. We walked in the front door. Carmen and Ethan are probably in the living room. I was feeling a bit tense about how they were going to react to him. I hoped they'd be nice.
"You're home," Carmen said, then looked up. "And you brought a guest." I looked to Ryan. "Ryan, these are my friends, Carmen and Ethan. Carmen and I live together, and Ethan's staying with us for a few days." Carmen smiled at him from the couch. "Nice to finally meet the famous Ryan. Jamie has been talking about you." Ryan smiled at me and then looked back at her. "Good things, I hope."
If she had anything bad to say, you wouldn't be here, trust me. Jamie is picky about the men she dates,"
Ethan said. "Thank you for that," I shot back with a roll of my eyes. "I think that's our cue to leave, Ryan. Let's go to my room." "Shall we wear our earplugs?" Carmen shouted. As we were walking out of the living room, I looked back to see Carmen making kissy faces at us. Such a child. Does she know what's going to happen in there? Because I sure don't. Ryan and I walked into my room and he looked around. Honestly, it was a surprise to have a man in my room and in my space. It had been a while. "You have a nice place, Jamie." He looked at the collage on the far wall, full of pictures of me and Carmen and Ethan through the years. "You've got some great friends. You're lucky to have each other." I chuckled. They have their moments. Ryan turned around and we stood looking at each other. It felt like he was just as shy about this as I was. "So," I began hesitantly, but Ryan crossed to me, tucked a lock of hair behind my ear, smiled and kissed me softly. His hands moved down my sides and came to rest on my hips. I wrapped my arms around his neck as the kiss deepened. "Do you mind?" he asked as his fingers gripped the hem of my blouse. At least he asked permission. He wanted to see more of me. Was I okay with that? "Sure." Ryan tugged the blouse up gently over my head. I shook out my hair. The next few minutes were us both removing our clothes and making our way to the bed. He was over me, kissing me and touching me in ways I hadn't been touched in quite a while. It was very, very, very nice. I could feel his hardness against my thigh as he moved between my legs. His lips were warm against my neck, his fingers making their way into my panties. I expected to feel differently with the moment in front of me, but maybe I wasn't ready after all. Maybe I was leading this towards sleeping together just to prove to the rest of them that I was serious about him. "Ryan," I whispered. He stopped what he was doing and looked up at me. His hair was messy and I liked it. "Is everything okay?" Well," I paused, unsure of what to say. I got him all excited, and now I was going to cut him off. "You're not ready to go quite this far, are you?" He shifted off me and smiled to reassure me. "It's only been a few dates, Jamie. We're still getting to know each other." "I know, I just should have realized before we both got undressed." He looked at me as I lay in front of him. "Well, I'm liking the view, so I'm okay with it. I can wait until you are ready." I was relieved that he was a gentleman and wasn't trying to push me into it. He didn't even get annoyed that I had got him into my bed and turned him down. "I'll be ready soon, just not yet." Ryan leaned forward and pressed a kiss to my lips. "I should probably go then." I stopped him from moving. "No, stay." Ryan lay down beside me, extending his arm, and I rested my head on his chest. It felt comfortable, lying there with him. It had to be enough for now. Ryan spent the night in my bed. Nothing happened except for some heavy kissing before we fell asleep. First thing this morning, he insisted on driving me to the airport to catch my flight. When we got there, he put his arms around me. "Last night was fun. I'm glad you asked me to stay over." "Me too. Thank you for taking me to the airport. Are you sure you don't mind dropping my car back at the apartment?" "Positive." Ryan pulled me close and kissed me. As my face arched up to his, I held my hat so it stayed in one place. It was the usual wet and cold December morning. I wish I could say thank God it's Friday, but it's pointless when I'm working all weekend. I pulled back from the kiss once I heard the continuous beeping of a horn. I turned around and looked in the direction of the noise. "Is that your boss?" Ryan asked, even though he already knew. I looked over to where Mason sat in the back seat of a black BMW parked at the curb. The window was down, and he was glaring at me. "Time is of the essence, Jamie," he snapped and opened his door. "He doesn't look happy," commented Ryan from beside me. Shall I leave your keys in with Carmen then? Please. I glanced at him gratefully. And thank you. So much. He placed a finger under my chin and lifted it to kiss me one final time. Call me when you land. I'll see you soon. I walked toward the car and smiled back at him before stepping inside. As I settled in beside Mason, I noticed his typical expensive suit and pissed-off facial expression as he looked at his phone. I don't understand why I'm in your car, Mr. Knight. We're at the airport.
There's a jet waiting. My driver will take us to the runway,
he replied, not taking his eyes off the screen. A private jet. Doesn't surprise me at all. Mason Knight is going to travel in style no matter the cost. So you and that guy. Mason shook his head. I just don't see it. I looked out the window as the car pulled away from the curb. Ryan is very nice. I like him a lot. I don't understand your issue, he chuckled.
So that's what Jamie Harris is into. Nice guys. I assume the only sexual position you know is missionary.
I snapped my head around. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised about his bringing up the topic. There's a driver sitting in the front seat. I'm sure he's heard and seen it all. Before you try some smart remark back, let me ask you this. Have you ever been pleasured? I mean so much that your toes curl and you just can't hold back your screams? Good morning to you too. It's hardly 8 a.m. I paused. If you really want to know, Mr. Knight, I have a vibrator. I take care of business. He smiled, resting against the leather seating, looking smugly pleased at my reply. Fair enough. But if you ever need that business taken care of, I'm happy to help. After a night with me, you won't be getting out of bed. Very cocky. I wonder if he lives up to his words. I'll never go there, so I'll never know. He was right about the missionary thing, though, as much as I hated to admit it. I'd only slept with a few people, and it had never been crazy passionate. Spending the next 2 days with Mason Knight, I had a feeling, was going to be an eventful way to spend time. Jamie. Straight off the plane and into meeting after meeting. We were in a building that I was unfamiliar with, and I was sitting outside of the office waiting patiently while Mr. Knight did his thing. It had been hours since we'd landed, and so far he hadn't really needed me. It made me suspect that he'd asked me here for reasons other than work. Maybe not. It was obvious now that he was coming on to me, and I'd made it quite clear that I wasn't interested. I'd thought he would give up, but Mason is the type of man who's used to getting what he wants. Jamie. His voice sent a shiver through me. I looked up at him. He looked like the day had gotten the better of him already. Yes, Mr. Knight? I need you to do up a copy of these. He handed me a stack of papers. The copy room is down the hall and to the left. I took the thick stack of papers from him and held them in my arms. Sure thing. There's a coffee shop downstairs in the lobby. I could do with a refuel, double shot and make it snappy. He invited me here to bring him coffee and photocopy things. I could have had great plans this weekend. I grabbed my things and got ready to leave. Do you want me to grab you something to eat? You haven't eaten yet? I was just trying to be nice since I was getting his coffee anyway. Whatever you're having. Mr. Knight winked at me before turning around and walking back into the office. The man has no idea that I'm a vegetarian. Imagine his face if I came back with a salad. Luckily, I knew what he liked. I grabbed my things and decided to get the photocopying done first. I walked down the hallway and into a room on the left. As I did my work, I wondered when we would be getting back to the hotel. It was already after 6. I was exhausted. I just wanted to get back to my room and crawl into bed. Haven't seen you around. A man walked into the copying room with a stack of papers in hand. Are you new? I smiled politely. I guess you could say that. I'm in town on business with my boss. Mason Knight? I sorted the pages from the photocopier neatly and stapled them. How did you know? He raised his eyebrows. I just came from that office. I'm assisting my boss. Mr. Knight is quite the bull, isn't he? What's it like working for him? That's one way to describe him. He has his moments. I try not to get on his bad side. I'd come to realize there was no neutral with Mason Knight. He's either gunning to ruin my day, snapping over nothing, or he's too forward and flirty. a complicated man. Well, at least he's something to look at. Mr. Blair is late 40s and balding. I chuckled. Mr. Knight might be nice to look at, but when it comes to personality, I think your boss might just take the lead. He smirked. Possibly. He extended his hand to shake. Joshua Benson. Joshua Benson was a nice-looking guy with an admirable sense of style. Better yet, I discovered in just those few minutes, he had the personality to go along with it. How long are you in town, Jamie? He asked, as we traded places by the photocopier. Just until Sunday. Then it's back home to London. I'm hoping Mr. Knight will give me 2 days off since I'm working through the weekend. You should make the most of your time. Order room service and make him foot the bill, that'll show him. He'd have my head for that. I picked up the photocopies in my arms. I should get back to it. It was nice meeting you. You as well, I'll see you in there. I left the room with files in hand and walked back to the desk I had been sitting at. I placed the files down. I'd have to get his coffee before I did anything else. Double shot and make it snappy. I took the elevator downstairs to the coffee shop and queued up with the late-night workers. After 6 on a Friday, and some were still hard at it. Finally, I placed my order of 2 to-go coffees and something to eat for Mr. Knight. You again! I looked over to see Joshua standing beside me. Oh, hi, you're in need of a refuel too? Definitely, but I'm hoping we'll be finished up in there soon. Joshua placed his coffee order. Here's hoping. I was handed the coffees and a takeout bag. Joshua was handed his while I placed the lids on the coffees. So I think my boss is planning on going to the Nest for drinks after the meeting. Normally a thing he likes to do after discussing business. I pressed the button for the elevator. What's the Nest? A rooftop bar with a pretty great view. I think it's a must when you're in Seattle. You should come. I shrugged lightly. I don't know. My worry wasn't going out with a man I'd only just met, but going out with my boss. And I was freaking tired. We stepped into the elevator, empty. Joshua glanced at me. You can tell by now that I'm gay, right? I'm asking you to come for a good time. I have no hidden agenda. I shook my head. That's not the problem. The doors opened, and there stood the problem, right in front of me. I was looking for you, Jamie. I need that coffee. I stepped out of the elevator before Joshua and handed Mr. Knight his coffee. Sorry, Mr. Knight. There was a line. Joshua smiled at me and walked ahead of us toward the office. I send you for coffee and you make a new friend. He watched Joshua go. Another nice guy. Nice guys are my type. I brought my coffee to my lips and sipped. Mason smirked and opened the bag I had given him. How did you know what I liked? Just my job, Mr. Knight. We walked back to the office. The man smells good, I'll give him that. I need you to sit in on the meeting and take some notes, Jamie. I've been sitting outside at this small desk since we arrived, and now he wants me to sit in. At least he's making use of me now. Okay, that's what I'm here for. I glanced down at my watch and saw it was close to 8 p.m. The bosses were still at the table chatting while Joshua and I sat aside taking notes as we went along. He's looking at you, Joshua whispered. I looked at Joshua and followed his line of sight. Mason was sitting at the desk chatting business, but looking at me. His eyes were fixed on me, actually, like he couldn't tear himself away. I pushed my black frames up my nose with my index finger. It's a thing I do when I'm feeling self-conscious. Was it the glasses that had him so fixated? Mr. Knight, Mr. Blair said, trying to get his attention. Mason took his attention off me and looked at Mr. Blair. I'm sorry, I was distracted. What were you saying? Their conversation went on, and I continued taking notes, noticing Mr. Knight glance over at me from time to time. Thankfully, the meeting ended not long after, and we packed up. It's been a long day. You're both joining us at the Nest tonight, yes? Mr. Blair asked as we walked toward the elevator. Mason glanced at me and back. We'll meet you there. We'll meet you there. He didn't even ask me if I wanted to go. Do I even have a choice in the matter? Would I be going to have a good time and drink, or would I still be taking notes as they chatted among themselves? We walked out into the cold. I closed up the buttons of my black wool coat against the breeze. See you there, Jamie. Joshua smiled before parting to go his separate way. Mason and I walked toward the waiting car and slipped into the back seat. We sat in silence as the car took off in the direction of the hotel. My phone rang in my bag. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. Mason glanced over.
Let me guess, Mr. Nice Guy.
I canceled the call and placed it back in my bag. I'll call him back at the hotel. Do I have to go out tonight? Yes, you have to. It's business. I need you to be there and make an impression. He looked at me. Wear a dress. For your benefit or the client's? I asked before I could stop myself. Holy shit. Did I just talk back to Mason Knight like that? He smirked. If I said mine, would you wear the dress? I shook my head. He apparently found it amusing, but I wondered if he was surprised that I was still resisting.
The Nest is a fancy rooftop bar. You should look the part. Who knows? You might enjoy yourself for once.
Jamie. To my surprise, Mason Knight respected me enough to book me a separate hotel room. I'd had a bit of anxiety about the situation since he'd asked me to come along, but thankfully he was at least being somewhat professional about this. His flirting was confusing, and I promised myself that I wouldn't get caught up in him. He was simply doing what he could to have me and throw me away, just like all the rest. He'd realized that I wouldn't fold easily, and yet the game remained the same. I looked into the floor-length mirror. I'd touched up my loose curls a bit, hoping I looked like I'd made some sort of effort. My makeup was soft and light, accentuating my eyes, which I'd always been told were my best feature. I sighed as I looked at myself. Be the good girl tonight. Because a good girl isn't something Mason Knight wants. A knock came on the door, interrupting my pep talk. I walked that way and looked through the peephole. Speak of the devil. I felt like keeping him waiting. I knew how impatient he could be, so I stood by the door as he knocked again. Serves him right. The cheek. Then my phone rang on the bed, and I knew it was him, so I had no choice but to open up. Mr. Knight stood looking sharp, smelling just as divine as he did an hour ago. I wouldn't deny his choice of aftershave. I'd never known a man to smell so good. He removed the phone from his ear and placed it in his pocket. I was trying to call you. Why didn't you answer the door when I knocked? I rolled my lips together. I was changing. You can't always expect people to answer the door straight off. And you didn't wear a dress either. Why am I not surprised? He looked sort of impressed that I didn't go with his choice of outfit and decided to go with what I chose. I shrugged my shoulders. I wasn't feeling it. Maybe I had wanted to wear a dress, but he'd asked me to, so I decided to go against him. Instead, I wore a pair of tight-fitted black pants and a cute blouse tucked in. Mr. Knight stopped, focusing his attention on my breasts.
At least that shirt is semi-see-through.
I already knew that. There was no embarrassment. It was just a bit see-through, but I was wearing a bra and carrying a blazer to wear over it. My phone rang and I walked toward it, picked it up, and looked at the screen. Ryan! Crap. I'd told him I would call when I landed. Then when I got back to the hotel, and then the day had been so busy. We need to leave, Jamie, insisted Mr. Knight from the doorway. Time is of the essence. I glared at him even as I silenced the phone. He didn't want me to answer that call, and it had nothing to do with time. But anyway, this whole weekend I was in work mode. I needed to do as he asked. The Nest was a fancy rooftop bar, the balcony closed for warmth. The drinks were pricey, $16 for a daiquiri. Looks like I'll be limiting myself to one then. Besides, I don't really want to get drunk and make a show of myself as the only woman at our table. I'm glad you came, Jamie, Joshua shouted from his place beside me at the bar. The music and chatter gave us no choice but to shout. We were ordering another round for our table of 8, and of the group of them, I was definitely appreciating my new friend here. I mean, what choice did I have? Me too, it's a nice bar. There's something going on between you two, isn't there? Joshua nodded in Mason's direction.
His eyes have still been on you all night.
I've noticed. If Joshua had noticed, then surely everyone else had as well. There's nothing going on, not really. Joshua chuckled. Nothing is always something. Besides, I looked him up. It appears he's quite the ladies' man. I turned my head. Well, I don't want to be just another one. I won't be used by him. He nodded his head in agreement. I hear ya. Fair play for holding firm. I sure as hell wouldn't. I smiled. Once a player, always a player. Jamie! Mason's voice came from behind. I turned. He took the drink from my hand and set it down on the bar. A word! He looked between Joshua and me, clearly not impressed, then turned and waded through the crowd. Someone is in trouble. Good luck with that, Joshua joked, picking up his drink and walking back to the table of men. I'm going to need that luck. I followed Mr. Knight through the crowd of socializing drunk people. He pushed open the frosted glass door that led to the hallway between the bathrooms. Of course it was empty. Seriously, no one has to pee? Mason snapped around. What are you doing, Jamie? You and that guy were talking about me in there. If he says the wrong thing to Mr. Blair, it could harm the business. He asked me and I just... Crap. I was stumbling over my words. Honestly, I couldn't think of a good enough excuse to be talking about him like that. I'm sorry, I wasn't thinking. As my mom always said, if you don't know how to explain yourself, just apologize. I was in the wrong. I shouldn't have said what I did. We stood silent for a few moments, only the music coming from the door behind us. Mr. Knight stepped into my space. Are you interested in me, Jamie? He took me by surprise again, another question that I in no way knew how to answer. Mr. Knight, please. He stepped even closer, pulling my bottom lip downward with his thumb. Am I the only one feeling this sexual frustration? If I am, tell me now and I won't waste any more of my time. Jesus Christ, save me. Tell him he's the only one feeling the frustration. You don't want to be just another one. You can stop pursuing me, Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight was clearly not satisfied by my answer. All right then, fine. He grabbed the steel bar of the frosted door, pulled it open, and walked out in a huff. I leaned back against the wall with a loud exhale. Mr. Knight was trying to have his way, and I turned him down yet again. Things were going to be awkward between us now. After gathering my thoughts, I pulled the door open and walked back into the bar to join the others. As I walked through the crowd, I noticed him with his arm already around some blonde woman. I was under the impression that he was trying to behave himself in front of his associates, but obviously that had gone out the window. The blonde was making it clear she was available for anything he wanted. I walked past them and sat down at the table next to Joshua. By the look on your face, I take it the conversation didn't go well? Joshua pushed a glass toward me. Luckily, I ordered you another drink. Cheaper. Thank you. I need this. I picked up the beer and drank. I knew drinking tonight was a bad idea, but I just couldn't help myself. I stepped out of the elevator and walked the carpeted hallway, Mr. Knight right behind me. His hands were on my hips on occasion to keep me upright. It was late now, and I was a lot more intoxicated than I had planned. What's your room number? He asked. I told you, 735, I slurred. I was carrying my shoes in my hands. I'm totally going to be sick tomorrow. There's only 300 rooms, so you're wrong about that, he said. I guess we can check with the key card until we find the right one. I had forgotten to bring the envelope that said the room number on it and just brought the key card instead. Usually it was written on the card itself, but I guess they'd forgotten to do that. Mason's suit jacket was slung over his arm. His white shirt was smeared with the blonde woman's lipstick. Are you upset with me? I shook my head. Why'd you say that? You drank quite a lot, and it doesn't seem like you're used to that. He placed a key card onto the wrong door, and it came up red. Are you upset about the woman? I shook my head again. I didn't care about her. I didn't understand what was going on here. What do you want from me, Mr. Knight? He placed the key card into another door, and it unlocked. Looks like I found your room. Isn't that a shame? Mason stopped me at the door and pushed me up against the frame. You know what I want, Jamie. Don't play dumb and pretend you don't want me because it's clear that you do. Mr. Big Bad Boss, you're confusing me. I can't get tangled up in you. What the hell was coming out of my mouth? The alcohol was messing with my head. Mason held me by the shoulders and looked into my eyes. I want to taste you. Mr. Knight wanted to taste me. He'll be tasting daiquiri and beer. Before I had a chance to react, his lips smashed against mine, with a lot more passion than he had done the first time. I willed myself to stop the kiss, to push him away before he had a chance to. But I couldn't. I'd been denying him, and I couldn't do it any longer. I was drunk, with no willpower left inside of me to say no. Jamie. When my eyes fluttered open, I found myself squinting because of the light. I sat up in bed with my head spinning and my stomach doing flips. Those drinks were a bad idea. What happened last night? What's wrong with you? I turned my head to see Mr. Knight next to me in bed, shirtless, the sheet up to his waist. By the look on your face, I'm guessing you don't remember a thing from last night. I certainly don't remember this. I jumped out of bed with a fright, trying to create some distance between us. Thankfully, I was fully clothed, but he wasn't. Mr. Knight, you're in my bed.
Well, that's what happens when you drink as much as you did. I've never seen you drink before, he said. Not something that I'll be forgetting anytime soon. Crap. I remember now. I remembered the blonde woman at the bar, kissing him as she danced. I got drunk enough that he brought me back here and we kissed at the door. But I didn't remember anything after that. Did we? I couldn't even bring myself to ask. We could have had sex, and I could have gotten dressed afterward. He sat up in bed, showing that he was all hard muscle. Please, Jamie, give me some credit. I wasn't going to touch you when you were drunk. Thank God. I released a long sigh of relief, finally certain that I had not had a drunken fling with my boss. I don't want things to be unprofessional in the office, Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight stood up from my bed and walked toward me completely naked. Damn it, I just knew he was naked under those sheets. Every part of his toned body was on show, and he wasn't at all embarrassed by it. His muscles moved, and his cock did too. I froze. I think we've passed unprofessional at this point. He moved toward me, placing his hands on either side of my head before pressing his lips against mine. It was unexpected that he would just go for it like that. He pulled back. His voice was low, gravelly. Why don't you do yourself a favor and allow the bad girl to come out and play? I will pleasure her like she's never been pleasured before. My heart was pounding, and he had me totally lost for words. I didn't know if that was because of his naked, muscular physique or his talk of sexual pleasure. Maybe both. We should, probably get ready for that morning meeting with Mr. Blair. I needed to say something to change the subject. He was turning me on, and I was weak. I don't need you for this one. You can stay here. Casually, he picked his clothes up from the floor and started to dress. Despite trying my hardest to divert my eyes, I just couldn't. I'd never looked at a man as muscular as he was. His body was sculpted to absolute perfection. Are you enjoying the view? It looks like you are. No, I cleared my throat and crossed my arms over my chest in embarrassment. Are you sure you don't want me to come with? It is why I'm here after all. I think you would be better off taking it easy until this evening. You drank a lot last night. Mr. Knight moved his pants around the curve of his ass and zipped them up at the front. His shirt came next. Did you bring the dress? The dress that I purposely left at home? I shook my head. You weren't feeling it, I'm guessing.
He sighed and grabbed his suit jacket from the back of the chair.
Meet me in the lobby at 1:30, and please don't be late.
He walked to the door, then turned back around with a smirk.
Make sure to hydrate.
The door closed. The man just loves telling me what to do. I know very little about Mr. Knight on a personal level, but it's obvious he likes to be in control. It's his way or no way. I lay back down on the unmade bed with a sigh. He was so stuck in my head. I couldn't deny that he was hot as hell and making it very hard for me to resist. I was the sort who believed in romance, and Mr. Knight was anything but. Can I just sleep with him? Allow him to pleasure me for one night only and not get attached? I don't know. I moved my hand down my body, into my panties, and moved my fingers gently as I thought of him. I thought of him naked in front of me with his erection. I thought of him bending over me, pleasuring me himself. Could the thought of him alone be enough? Or was I just denying what I truly wanted? Mr. Knight and I had been greeted with expensive champagne at the doors of a lavish boutique, the kind of boutique that needed an appointment just to get inside, the kind I would in no way get into without that boss of mine. The warm welcome was all for him. I looked at the expensive clothing on the racks while he walked alongside me. This place is nice. I suppose only the rich are allowed. Being a billionaire goes a long way. It's better to shop this way, in an empty store with no interruptions. I stepped closer to him, breathing in his masculine scent. If you think we're hooking up in the dressing room, you're going to be left disappointed. I'm not that kind of girl. I know you're not. You're making that quite clear. We're here to find you a dress, so let's do that. Mr. Knight moved my dark hair back. Preferably something strapless. I guess we'll see. I fixed my shirt and continued browsing. I was shrugging him off like he was having no effect on me. He watched my every movement while I browsed. I wasn't sure if he was agitated or impressed by me. Probably both. After having his eyes on me for entirely too long, I dropped the act of browsing and cut my eyes at him. Mr. Knight, if I may be frank, you're used to getting what you want, exactly when you want it. Haven't you ever heard of waiting? He turned and picked up 2 dresses from the rack and handed them to me. Both were red, of course. Here, these 2, because you know I like red on you. He likes me in red. You haven't answered my question. He sighed. Yes, Jamie, I can wait. I took the dresses from his hand. Good. Then I walked toward the dressing room. Red isn't a color I usually go for, but I guess I could try it on just to humor him. I stepped into the dressing room and stripped down to my underwear. I looked at myself in the first red dress of his choice. I remembered Mr. Knight telling me that brunettes weren't his type. Yet here we were. I heard his voice outside, so I pulled the silver curtain back and let him have a look.
That's quite a dress, Miss Harris.
Thank you, I murmured. He looked like he wanted to come inside.
You shouldn't come in here. We could get in trouble.
Jesus, don't I sound like a 5-year-old? He grinned. I'm Mason Knight. No one tells me what to do. He moved me back against the wall and his lips pressed mine firmly and aggressively, like he wanted more than just a kiss. 4 times we've kissed now, each time taking it further than the last. The difference was this time I was not intoxicated, and I was full-on kissing him back. I laced my arms around his neck just as his fingers made their way to my panties. I gasped against his lips as his fingers moved inside of me, pleasuring me much better than I had done to myself that morning. Is everything okay in there? Said a male voice from the other side of the curtain. Crap. Mason pulled back from the kiss.
Everything is fine. She's decided on one. Red.
Will you get her some things to match? We waited until eventually we were alone again. My heart was beating out of my chest. Oh my God, I told you we would get caught. Getting hot and heavy in a changing room isn't something I do. That was crazy. He winked. I hope we can pick up where we left off later. Then he turned and left the dressing room. The moment he was out of sight, I leaned back against the wall with a sigh. I'd enjoyed that a bit too much. I looked in the mirror. My cheeks were red and flushed, my hair messy. I saw disaster ahead, but damn if I wasn't liking the journey already. Jamie. I walked down the front steps of the hotel in my new red dress. I was getting the eye from men as they passed by, but it was Mason Knight who had my attention. After having his lips on mine, his hands caressing my skin, I knew what women found so alluring. They had a taste and came back for more, despite knowing he would only bed a woman once. I wondered if it was because he worried about getting bored or attached. He seemed like a very guarded man, every way but sexually. Mason stood by the door to the waiting car. You look ravishing in red. I take it you like it then. You picked it after all. Not that he'd really given me a choice in the matter. He pulled me against him and discreetly moved my hand down to his rock-hard crotch. I think that's proof of how much I like it. A lot of proof. Did it make me feel good to know that he got hard seeing me in red? But the man has been hard over half the women of London. I slipped into the car and he walked around the other side and did the same. I looked out the window as the driver took off for the restaurant. It was 6:45 and already dark, the weather cold enough that even my wool coat wouldn't keep me warm. "What's on your mind, Jamie?" I brought my attention from the window and over to him. "Nothing. I'm fine." He shook his head. "You women always say nothing, but it's clear that it's something. I should know. I've studied you lot for years." "I don't think you know much about women at all, Mr. Knight, unless it's to do with women's bodies. You seem to know a lot about that." He raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Touché. I do know a lot about women's bodies. I would like to get to know yours a bit more." He placed his hand on my knee and moved it up my leg slowly. Here, now, with the driver sitting up front, what he wanted to do to me wouldn't go unnoticed. I moved his hand away. "No, not here." He leaned in, his lips to my ear. "I want you, Jamie. I want you bad." I chuckled. "You're just going to have to be patient." "I'm not a very patient man. I think you know that already." He glanced down at my breasts. "I want to see you, all of you. You've seen all of me. I'm pretty sure you were happy to parade around in front of me naked. Was that enough of a tease for you to want more? Earlier in the dressing room, you seemed very into it." My lord, he's making my head spin. Just hearing him talk about it was causing all my blood to rush downward. "I think you should sit back and relax, Mr. Knight. We have a long night ahead of us." I was standing at the bar with Joshua, getting another drink while the men at the table talked business. Déjà vu much? Since we were the assistants, we figured we would make ourselves scarce and have a drink alone. "Oh, Jamie," Joshua chuckled, "it's so obvious that something happened between you and your precious boss." "Is it? I figured it was game over when I saw him with that lady at the nest last night." That wasn't exactly the truth, but I didn't know Joshua well, and I wasn't in the mood to get vulnerable. I sighed and glanced in Mason's direction. He looked so serious as he chatted business. It was his best look. Let's just say he wormed his way into my good books and I'm finding it hard to keep my distance. "He likes you. You like him. He looks like he would show you a wild night in the sack." I faced Joshua again. "I'm seeing another man back in London. We've only been on a few dates, but I feel bad fooling with Mason behind his back." "If you're not official, there's no need to feel bad. Lots of people fool around with a few people at the same time. I'm sure your guy back home is too." Was Ryan doing that? I hadn't stopped to wonder. I couldn't blame him if he had been. "I guess so," I said, shrugging. "We've not discussed becoming exclusive. He dropped me at the airport after spending the night in my bed." Why was I saying all this? "Jamie!" I heard Mason's voice from behind me. He had a habit of sneaking up behind me mid-conversation when I was possibly saying something embarrassing. I turned. "Are you ready to leave?" Okay." I was surprised that he was leaving so early. I'd figured it was going to be another late one. "Let me just grab my—" I looked down and noticed my coat draped over his arm. "Coat, thank you." Mason handed me my coat and I slipped it on. Honestly, I was glad to have more coverage. I looked at Joshua and smiled. "I guess this is goodbye." "Looks like it. It was great getting to know you, Jamie." He closed the distance between us and hugged me. "You have my number. Make sure to keep in touch." "You too. Don't be a stranger." I pulled back from the hug, surprised at how close I had gotten to him after just 2 days together. Mason and I walked through the restaurant together, and I waved to our table on the way. His hand was on my lower back as we walked out into the cold and toward the waiting car. He looked rather impatient on the drive back, sighing at the traffic in front of us, tapping his foot. He wanted to get back to that room fast. I was sure if things had gone his way, he would have had me in the hotel bathroom. "Traffic! Jesus Christ!" I chuckled. "Relax, Mr. Knight. I'm sure we won't be long. At least it's nothing compared to the traffic back home." The cars started to move again. "Thank God for that." He turned his head toward me, and after a moment his lips twisted into that trademark smirk. I walked into my hotel room and set my clutch down on the table. Just as I was about to remove my coat, Mason came up behind me and removed it himself. I turned and looked at him, knowing what was going to happen next. From what I'd heard, This was not about to be sweet missionary style. I might even be surprised if a bed was used at all. On the desk? Up against the wall? In the shower? I guess I'm about to find out.
Jamie,
He whispered, his face pressed against mine.
I'm going to fuck you so hard you won't believe it.
There it is. His lips were on mine, like he was hungry, while his hand fisted a chunk of my dark hair. My hands moved in the direction of his leather belt. I opened his pants and moved them down over his ass. I watched as he removed his suit jacket and undid the buttons of his shirt. Again, he stood before me naked, while I was fully clothed. I guess I'd better even the score. I kicked off my heels and undid the zipper on the back of my dress. It was a relief to be able to breathe again after wearing that the entire night. Take it off, Jamie. I want to see you. I loosened my grip on the fabric and it fell to the floor. My nipples were rock hard and it was obvious. I had just a pair of panties on as he moved toward me, immediately capturing my lips in another kiss of passion. So fucking hot, he whispered. Remember that time in the elevator when you said brunettes weren't your type? Well, you're here with me, so does that mean you've changed your mind? He considered me for a moment.
You're the exception.
Oh, the exception? To the rule? I don't understand that. You like who you like, you can't control it. Mason laced his fingers with mine, pushed me back against the wall, and held my hands up above my head.
Enough talking, not enough fucking.
He rubbed me over my panties, already damp, and captured my nipple in his mouth while cupping my breast in his hand. I quietly moaned as he swirled his tongue around my tip. That's good. He released my nipple from his mouth and hovered over my lips. Rub me. Take it in your hands and feel how big it is for you. I reached down and took his hard cock in my hand. I can't believe I'm doing this, even though I want to. I've never been this wild and vocal with a man. Mason wrapped his arms around me and lifted me off the floor. He gripped my ass, spreading my cheeks as he carried me to the desk. I was set down on the wood. My arms were around his neck as I kissed him. Are you ready? I nodded in reply, and he picked up his pants from the floor and took out a wrapped condom. He tore it open, tossed the wrapper, and rolled it down his hard length. I bit down on my bottom lip, turned on just watching him. Mason moved toward me, pulling me closer, and soon pushed his massive cock inside of me. Well, he said rough. He gripped my hips and pulled my body closer to his as he thrust inside of me. I gasped with pleasure, hardly able to catch my breath. Oh, God! Moan for me, Jamie. Louder. Let it all out. Show me exactly how much you like it. He moved at a rapid pace before pulling out of me and turning me around so I was bent over the desk. He wanted to take me from behind? I really should stop being surprised. He pushed inside, building that amazing sensation between my legs as he gripped me and slammed me back onto him. Call me Mr. Knight, he demanded, thrusting harder. Yes, Mr. Knight, I moaned. More, more. My wall of self-control was thin, my voice upped by nearly 2 octaves. The thrusting became too much for me to handle, and his moans and curses of pleasure made it even more unbearable. I'd had him now. 15 minutes of rough pleasure from the Mason Knight, much more than I had expected. How would I manage to go without? Jamie. I stepped onto the tarmac. Mason Knight wasn't far behind me. I could hear the noise of his shoes with every step and smell his expensive cologne. Mason had spent most of the flight home buried in his work, finishing up the details from the business trip. It was pretty much like last night had never happened. Exactly what I had expected, what I'd prepared myself for, one time and one time only. That was the best I'd ever had. After the deed was done, we'd collapsed onto the king-size bed. I woke up during the night and found Mason had left. There was a note on my bedside table letting me know our flight home would be an earlier one than planned. Do you need a ride home, Jamie? I smiled. No thanks. My friend is waiting on me. I'll see you tomorrow morning. You've worked through the weekend. I think you've earned a couple of days off. Mason stopped by the door to his car. I'll see you Wednesday morning. That's generous of him. I was worried about working 2 weeks straight. I was absolutely exhausted too. Thanks, Mr. Knight. See you Wednesday morning then.
Then I walked away, trying my best to be casual. This was normal for him, but it wasn't for me. How am I going to go on day in, day and out, working for him, knowing what's underneath those clothes? After hearing him moan while he did anything he wanted with me, it wasn't exactly something I could just erase. Carmen was waiting in her car outside the private runway, just like we had arranged. I opened the back door and threw my bag on the seat. "Hi, love." "Hey." I opened the door to the passenger side and slipped in. "Thanks for picking me up. We left earlier than planned since business was taken care of." Carmen winked. "Naughty business?" "So we're getting right to it then." I sighed and smiled. "Business of multiple sorts," she squealed. "Oh my God, I knew it. I knew you couldn't resist his Moby Dick." I chuckled. "You had that one saved up in case I slept with him, didn't you? I rehearsed on the drive over, so I want to know everything. Don't be stingy with the details. Tell Carmen." She started up the car and we got on our way. "I don't know what there is to tell. It was hot and rough, just like I expected, and he was in control the entire time." Carmen grinned. "How big? Massive?" "A cucumber has got nothing on Mason Knight, that's for sure." She could hardly contain herself with laughter. Definitely not a good thing for the driver. Maybe I should have saved the saucy details until we made it home. "So what happens now, then?" I shrugged. "Nothing, I suppose. He only sleeps with a woman once, remember? I was his brunette exception for one night. That's that. Well, at least you'll always have that night together. The memory and a dildo will keep you going." She glanced over at me. "Well, and Ryan." Ugh. I've been feeling so guilty over him. I slept with Mason despite not even going on a date with him, yet I've been out with Ryan a number of times and I still turned him down the night before I left. He was such a good guy, so patient and kind. He's going to treat me well, you know. Carmen shrugged. "Maybe you weren't feeling it with him. I think you're trying to convince yourself that you like him like that." "Carmen, am not. He's cute, I like him. Cute he may be, but not the best fuck of your life." I dropped my head into my hands. Just let me drink myself into oblivion. I guess sleeping with Mason was a mistake. I'd rather not discuss it again. Let's just pretend it never happened. If you say so. 2 days off work. I would like to have a drink so I could forget the events of the weekend for a couple of hours. That is, until Mom called and invited me to dinner. I was sitting at the table with my dad after being roped into playing his usual game of cards. Playing cards with Dad was something Jake and I grew up doing, especially while we waited on dinner to come to the table. A few years ago, when we were still in uni, we played a game of slaps. It was one I never forgot. Let's just say my brother left the table with more than a sore hand and a bruised ego. He hasn't played cards with me since. "How was your weekend in Seattle?" Dad asked, not looking up from his cards. I was sure he had a good hand. "Yeah, it was good." I could feel my face getting hot. Even though I'm older now, when I've done something I'm not proud of, I always think my parents have immediately found out somehow. "Well, I hope that Mr. Knight has given you some time off considering you've worked through the weekend." My mom had her hands in a pair of oven mitts as she took out the casserole. The smell of spices wafted through the air. She always makes a separate dish just for me. I love family dinners, but today I wanted to avoid the questions. "I'm off until Wednesday. Mason gave me 2 days off. He isn't as bad as everyone makes him out to be." "Ugh, Jamie, could you sound more obvious?" Dad scoffed. "I don't know about that. A man with money and power that's all gone to his head, I doubt he knows the meaning of the word respect." Yikes. "Well, maybe someday he'll learn," Mom butted in. "He is quite yummy, though, isn't he, sweetheart?" Jesus Christ, Mom. I had a feeling my face couldn't get any redder. My dad rolled his eyes, leaning back in his chair. "Your mother has a thing for younger men now. I'm pretty sure there's more than books being discussed at Tuesday's book club." "Oh, don't complain now, Clay. There's plenty of me to go around." Mom placed the casserole down on the table. My dad spanked my mom lightly before placing his arm around her waist. "Julia, you are all mine. You know that." Much to my embarrassment, I sat watching their display of affection and playfulness. I've grown up watching them like this.
I suppose it's why I look up to them when it comes to relationships. Okay, I mumbled. That's enough of the kissing and the slapping and the nauseating, Mom chuckled. There's nothing wrong with showing affection to the one you love. This will be you down the line, believe it or not. I rolled my eyes. I doubt that. Mom grabbed cutlery from the kitchen island. How are things between you and Ryan? I knew she was going to ask about him sooner or later. She was so rooting for us to become official. We're not official or anything, just seeing how things go for now. I want to take my time and get to know him before rushing into anything. She looked at me, hopeful. But you like him? Yes, I like him. I'm seeing him again this week. I don't know what we're doing yet. He wants to keep it a surprise. Well, that sounds promising. I know he'll treat you well. Mum placed the vegetarian casserole down on the table in front of me. The front door opened. Hello! Jake walked down the hall into the kitchen. Well, aren't you lot thoughtful, waiting for me before you start? We haven't started, sweetheart. Mum waved him down. Sit and I'll dish up for you. She grabbed a plate and fussed over him like she always does. Thanks, Mom. My brother stuffed his face with a mouthful of food. I was out with a girl all day. I'm famished. I groaned. You're gross. Jake chuckled. That wasn't what I was talking about, but shows where your mind is at. By the way, Jamie, how is Carmen? I groaned more loudly. Shut up. Touché. So Christmas is the week after next. You're both staying the night, right? Mom looked across the table. Sure I am, I said. It wouldn't be Christmas if we didn't stay the night. The thought alone had me excited. We haven't gone a year without being under the same roof on Christmas morning, so why stop now? All right, Jake sighed, though he was only pretending to be indignant. Count me in. It's tradition, after all.
Mason. I was sitting behind the desk in my office, hands clasped in front of my mouth as I watched Jamie through the open door. She was sitting behind her desk, her legs crossed and on show. That sexy checkered skirt was giving me all sorts of naughty thoughts. I hadn't been able to shake her these past few days, which isn't something I'm used to. Usually I'd have them and that's that. I don't get attached. You still haven't had your way with her, I take it, commented Brent, walking into my office. I sighed, averting my eyes from the temptation. No, I've had her. Brent sat on a chair in front of my desk. You've had her? Then she mustn't have been very good if you look so dissatisfied. I leaned back in my chair. Jamie fixed the black frame glasses on her nose. She was perfectly good. The problem is I want more. He chuckled. Whoa there. I hope that's not your way of telling me you're ready to settle down. Does Mason Knight want a couple of kids in a minivan? Jesus, of course not, but I might be considering bending my rules for her. Once more wouldn't hurt. I didn't savor the moment the first time round. I think she's going to expect more than just one more round if you go there again. Brent stood. But it's your choice to make. She won't. I'll make it clear. A bunch of us are going out tonight. New club called Frost. Come with. I'm sure there will be some girls to take your mind off the brunette. He looked in Jamie's direction. I sighed. I don't know. I have a lot on. Which is why you need the break. I'll see you at 9. Brent walked out of my office before I had a chance to decline his offer. It was after 6 when I was finishing up. Not many were left, apart from Jamie as she finished up my next week's schedule like I'd asked her to. I wondered if walking out there and asking her back to mine would be an easy task, or would I just be wasting my time? She hadn't attempted anything. We'd exchanged 5 words at most all day. She'd seen it enough. Of course she knew my deal. But if I offered her more, would she accept? I stood from my desk. I guess I was going to find out. Jamie, she stood up. Mr. Knight, I meant to talk to you. That meeting with... I wasn't even paying attention to her words. I was focused on her lips, plump and pink-shaded. I wanted to suck them, bite them. I wanted them open and around my fuck. I was getting hard just thinking about it. How is it possible that she has this effect on me? What the fuck is going on here? Just fucking kiss her and be done with it. Take her on the desk right here, right now. There was no one around at this point to watch. Jamie, stop talking. She finally paused and looked at me with furrowed brows. I moved closer, leaned in, and kissed her. Hard. I was pleased to realize that she wanted it. Or that's what I thought, until she pulled away. Mr. Knight, she whispered, moving her fingers over her top lip, which was slightly plumper than it had been before the kiss. What was that? You know what that was. You liked it, didn't you? My heart was hammering. Don't answer that, I already know. But I thought— I want you, Jamie, I interrupted. That night in Seattle wasn't enough to satisfy my craving for you. I need you again. Well, the thing is— She seemed to take a moment to collect herself. What's going on here, Mr. Knight? Before I had a chance to reply, the elevator doors opened. Jamie moved away, and I knew the reason why when I turned and saw who it was. Mr. fucking nice guy. He's like a fucking boomerang. Ryan, hi, Jamie chirped nervously, and went to him. He kissed her cheek. You look gorgeous, babe. Babe? She's his babe now? Give me a break. They hardly even know each other. I didn't think she was still seeing him after what happened between us in Seattle. Needless to say, this was an unpleasant surprise. Thought I'd come up and get you. Right, no worries, I was just finishing up some things. I'm ready to go. Jamie grabbed her bag and her coat. Then she pointed to a stack of files on the desk. Mr. Knight, there's everything you need for the morning. I'll see you tomorrow then. Nice seeing you, Mr. Knight. He gave me a perfectly friendly smile, but I saw his arm go around her shoulders. I watched them walk down the hallway together. The guy was way too keen. Are they an item now? An official couple? If so, it would be a first for me. I'd never been rejected before.
Jamie. I walked out of the building in the crook of Ryan's arm. He was being very affectionate. I wondered if it was because the last time we saw each other we ended up in bed together. Or was he putting on a show in front of the womanizer? I hadn't told Ryan about what went down in Seattle. I took everyone's advice and kept it to myself. He wanted to go out again, and I said yes. Why not? I liked him. He was a great guy. As for Mr. Knight, I didn't know what was going on there. That kiss was unexpected. He was coming at me for another round? It confused the hell out of me. Where are we going, Ryan? Well, babe, you're just going to have to wait and see. I really hope you'll like what I have planned. We walked toward his car, parked not far from the building. My phone vibrated in my purse, and I opened the clasp and pulled it out. I was surprised to see that it was a message from Mason. I moved away from Ryan casually, and I opened the message.
Babe, really?
Are you really jealous? I didn't think Mason Knight had a jealous streak. I slipped into the passenger side of Ryan's car and pulled my seatbelt over my chest as I waited for a reply. Ryan pulled onto the road. My phone vibrated again.
Don't go out with him, Jamie. Ditch that guy and spend the night in my bed. I promise you won't regret it.
Ditch Ryan to spend another night in Mason Knight's bed. It was an opportunity most people didn't have. Why me? Why am I the one he chooses to give more of his time to? In that bag down by your feet is a little something, Ryan pointed. I put my phone away and grabbed the bag tucked away beside my feet. I opened it. Trainers? Why do I need these? I chuckled. For the surprise, silly. I called Carmen and she told me your size. Gee, thanks. That's so sweet of you. I'm excited. Guess this means I'm not canceling my date last minute, as Mason suggested I do. Even so, his offer of another night was tempting. That kiss we'd shared was tempting too. Mason Knight was messing with my head, which meant I would have to mess back.